So, I want to talk about the replies that I got yesterday from my video. I was trying to have fruitful conversations with people on YouTube, on Instagram, and on Reddit, and every conversation that I had, almost all of them, I got stuck because people weren't focusing on my arguments, they were focusing on different things that don't matter, and I'm going to explain them. The first argument that people were giving me constantly, and I think it's fairly stupid, and that it's actually quite shameful that people were using that against me, is, oh, how can you talk about this if you're white? You've never experienced racism, you're not a black person, how can you talk about this? What do you know? Well, I mean, first of all, I think that's by definition racist, and I think everyone can agree on that, because they're telling me that I can't talk about something because I don't have enough melanin, because my skin is too pale. That's insane that we're saying that in 2020 about an intellectual conversation. But not only is it racist, it's also wrong, because I'm not even white. Like, I'm 1/4 gypsy, and gypsies are actually, and I'm gonna link a study below that proves it. I'm not making this up. I didn't know this until I read the study. That gypsies are the most discriminated minority in Europe. More than blacks and more than Muslims. It's the most discriminated minority. And we know this because people have been asked if they would rather have a co-worker that was black, people wouldn't care. If they would rather have a co-worker that is Muslim, most people wouldn't care, but they would care and feel the most uncomfortable with a gypsy. Okay? Because even if a lot of gypsies aren't so dark, the gypsy culture and what people assume that gypsies have, it's really bad. It's about thieving, and it's about not being trustworthy. Okay, so there's definitely, like, racism doesn't just, like, this is about the self-centrism that I see in America. That they seem to think that this is all about black people. I mean, like, gypsies are a total race. It's not white, it's not black, it's a different thing. And there's specific racism towards them. But not even just gypsies. I mean, what about Philippines? I mean, like Filipino people, they get a lot of racism. I mean, like Japanese and Chinese, they look down on them. Okay, so are you seriously gonna tell them, no, you can't talk about racism because you're not black and you don't know anything. Just black people suffer racism. That's just, I mean, absurd. Okay? So that argument, I think people should be ashamed, and I think if you're white, and you know, you're not even 1/4 gypsy, you're just 100% white, know that you can talk about this, okay? That, as I explained in my video before, white people have suffered historically a lot of racism, okay? I mean, Jews especially, and you can talk about this, and this is exactly the kind of conversation we don't need, because it's all about separation. It's about, oh, you're black, you're white, you can talk about this or you can't. What we need is unity. I mean, we are all human beings and we are empathic. Even if I have never experienced racism, which is not the case, I can understand people, okay? Like, even if I'm not a woman and I'm not an Indian, when I see this horrible tradition in India where women, when a husband dies, the woman he's married to is killed, is burned with them. I don't need to be a woman or to be an Indian to understand that that's wrong and to talk about it. Okay, we're all human beings, we are empathic. Okay, I don't have to be suffering for you to understand your pain. Okay, and so that first argument, it's kind of stupid, like I said, and the second argument is actually far better. I still think it's wrong, and I'm going to explain why. And it's something along the lines of, well, if you're a Spaniard, if you've only lived in Norway and Spain, why are you talking about America? What do you know about racism in America? Like, even if I was black, but I lived in Europe, how can I talk about this? So I think that's wrong, because think about it. I mean, what's the only thing that I would gain by living in America? The only thing I would gain is anecdotal evidence. That's it. I mean, just to be able to say, okay, I've seen this with my own eyes, I've seen racism, but that's exactly what we don't need. Because this conversation is very complex and we need a much more nuanced conversation. And we need objective measures to talk about racism. That's why I talk about Obama. That's why I talk about O.J. Simpson, both of which prove that systematic racism is dead against black people. Otherwise, they wouldn't have happened. I mean, we know neither to have a black president or what happened with O.J. Simpson, those things couldn't have happened in the 60s. We know that. Okay? So I also talk about criminality rates. Okay? And I also talk about poverty. And I talk about many other objective measures. And that's the conversation we should be having. And I can talk about that even if I'm European. Okay? Anecdotal evidence is not the way to go forward. So, for all these reasons, I think I'm more than qualified to talk about racism in America. I think that if you're white, you should be able to do it, and no one should ever stop you because of your race. And every group has suffered, so we all know what racism is. Even if you don't know it, you can understand it because we are empathic and we are human beings. And if you're European or if you're from other country, you can also talk about this because you may know more about racism in America than, for example, a black person that is only relying on anecdotal evidence of one time that he had a problem with the police. Okay, so this is complex, and we need smart people. We need conversations, and if we are like no one really argued against my arguments in the video. Everyone was saying, "Oh, you're white," or "You're not really a gypsy," or "You don't look gypsy," or "You're a Spaniard. You have an accent." I mean, is that really the kind of conversation we want to have? Really? I mean, because that's just, it's shameful. It's shameful that that's the kind of conversation we want to have. We should be talking about the arguments that I laid. Okay, regardless of my skin color, regardless of my oppression. Like I said it, stop being a victim. Stop using oppression and your skin color to talk about everything or to, to get ahead. So that's my point. I want to know what you think, but if you're going to tell me that I'm white or that I'm a Spaniard and that I can't talk about this, I'm not going to listen.